Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to another Soul Encoded video. Today I wanted to talk about my 5 tips on making a good pull request. So if you are, fresh out of college, or you're self-taught, or you just haven't had the opportunity to work with a lot of people, learning how to do proper pull requests will definitely help you be able to contribute faster, become a better engineer, and fundamentally, I think it's a skill and it's kind of an art to write a good pull request. So without further ado, let's get down to the list. My tip number 1 is to make small pull requests. So something like less than 300 lines is like kind of the sweet spot. Anything more than 300 lines, it gets really difficult to review as a reviewer. So chances are most people will just kind of blanket merge saying, hey, like there's too much to review. I can't really review this properly. And while that's probably not the best case, that's kind of the reality of things. You need to be very mindful of the fact that people who are reviewing your code base, reviewing your PRs, they don't really have the full context to the way you are working, right? So they don't have the full story, so it's actually really hard to review a PR if it's really, really large. Like if you touch 30 files or something like that, then at that point, the person reviewing it, they have no idea whether or not the changes that you're making is actually valid or not. So there's some studies saying that like if you have PRs that are like larger than like 300 lines, then it increases your odds of like creating new bugs or bugs not being caught by like 70% or something like that. I read some article somewhere stating that fact, but I'm not sure if that's 100% true. But I generally think that making small pull requests is not only good for the reviewers, but it's really good for you as well as an engineer, because you can more concretely say, hey, I know that these are the changes and you're touching less things at once, so there's less chance of side effects. And yeah, just overall, it's a good practice to make smaller changes and more changes often. So tip number 2 is to write a really good summary. Now, if you've never seen a really good summary, generally there's not really like a set guidelines. Your team might have different formats and like templates to write good summaries. But what I like to see in the pull request is if the PR has like a really good title, first of all, then that's a plus. Usually I like to see PRs that reflect back to the ticket. So the title should have like the ticket number and then like a summary of the ticket. And then the next thing is it should have a few things. One, it should list out kind of the large changes that they did. And then number 2, it should have a really good explanation of how to test the changes, or like what pages to visit, or what kind of functionality you're looking for. Like the expected behavior essentially of the change. The main reason for this is that if you want to make impact quickly and make a lot of changes to the code base quickly, essentially be able to merge your code in, the better job that you do to allow other people to review your code, the easier that process will be. So all of the information, all of these things that I'm listing out below is just ways to help other people, look at your code quickly. And if I see a PR that has like no description or anything, I don't really want to take a look at it. I usually ask them to, hey, leave some kind of like information on how to test it, what the changes are, things like that. And it's really nice if they have like, if they deployed it already somewhere in like a dev environment and they just have a link there. That's like icing on the cake, right? The more time that you save other reviewers, the faster your PR will get merged, hence you'll, be able to contribute more. Number 3 is something that should be obvious, but it's definitely worth mentioning, is to not break existing functionality. And the best ways to prevent like breaking things that are already working is to, number 1, make sure you always run the tests before you make a PR. that's like unit tests, end-to-end, whatever testing suite that your team operates in, make sure you have tests and run them. Also, make sure you don't break deployment processes. So make sure it builds properly, make sure the project can, I always say, hey, whenever you're making changes, after you deploy your branch separately to a dev environment, to make sure that, the deployment and nothing, these are all things that people are like, oh yeah, it should work. So oftentimes it gets skipped. But I highly recommend you guys to take the extra 20-30 minutes to do all these things for every PR, because then you'll break things less often, you'll have a better reputation, overall it's just like better practice. Now, large companies, some of these are automatically done, right? So for example, let's say you make a PR, some companies, some teams might have hooks to automatically run all of these test suites, so you don't have to really think about it. So that's kind of a hint right there. If your team doesn't have that, then you could be the one to bring that in, and you could get a lot of credit for something like that. It's very impactful. It saves a lot of people time. So tip number 4 is a little bit more advanced, but it's basically being very mindful of your commits. Now, the thing about commits is that people don't really leverage their commits. Oftentimes, what you see with a lot of new engineers and junior devs, if you look at their commit messages, just looking at someone's commit messages, you could almost kind of guess at how what type of engineer they are, right? If they have really detailed commit messages, then chances are they're more senior and they understand the value of having a clean commit history, right? Of course, this is not a blanket statement, but it's just something that I've seen overall, that people who care about commit messages and actually leverage their commit messages, they understand why, instead of the typical, so think about it, why do we use version control as a software engineer, right? It's because we want to leverage our commits, and they're essentially big milestones and checkpoints through our development process. So it'd be awesome to cherry pick things out or be able to go back to a certain point and restart. All of these are tools, but oftentimes when you see devs, starting out, you'll see like commit messages that doesn't even make sense. They'll say stuff like LOL, messed up something, there's all these BS commit messages. And the thing is, the more you treat your engineering as like a craft, right? This modern day craft. At least that's how I like to think about it. You should care about every aspect of the work that you're doing. You wouldn't see a master craftsman do things haphazardly, just saying, hey, all this stuff in the middle doesn't really matter, only the end result matters. Most true craftsmen care about every process, because they understand that in the long run, all of these little things add up to making you a great engineer, or I guess blacksmith or something. Finally, this is kind of just an interesting tip, but I think it's personally really useful if you start working with a lot of people, is to just not take any comments personally, right? So the thing that happens most often when you start working with other people is that people have slightly different, ways of coding, different practices, and they just have different opinions. Everyone has different opinions. It doesn't matter what job you're doing, but at least in software engineering, because there's certain things the same problem can be solved in multiple ways. Sometimes someone might do something that's not the way that you would ideally want to do it, and vice versa. Maybe you write something and people are like, yeah, that's not really the best way. So the first tip around there is that first, don't take it personally, because they're just trying to do their work, right? Unless they're trying to screw you over or something, but that's rare. But mainly, don't take it personal. Really, think about the comments that they're making and see if that is just. Now, if your implementation, if you feel really strongly about it, you should be able to, articulate that. Sometimes it's really hard to resolve that conflict or whatever, but generally, if you just feel strongly about a certain implementation, then you should voice it. But if that doesn't work, then you should, get another opinion, get someone else to pitch in, and you should always be like kind of open-minded and in the position that, hey, maybe my implementation is not like the best. You should always have that in your mindset, because the number one thing that, you know, makes engineers like kind of suck long term is to be super just always thinking that you're the best. You know, that's like a really bad mentality to have for your personal growth. You know, you have to be open, you have to, you know, be able to take criticism well. So on that like kind of, you know, thought process, just being like not taking anything too personally will help you out in the long run when you're gonna be writing all these like pull requests. Because, you know, as an engineer, that's like your bread and butter, right? You're gonna be doing a lot of PRs, you're gonna review a lot of PRs. You know, that's just how the way the cookie crumbles, essentially. So anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, I'm thinking about doing another video relating to this, which would be like the opposite side of this, like how to review a PR. My baby just woke up, so I'll see you guys next time. Bye.